Unaware his wife was pregnant with triplets and had just inherited $100 million, Mason Cole stood on a stage in a glass ballroom holding a microphone in one hand and his new fiancée's fingers in the other. The band stopped. The lights dimmed. Cameras rose like a forest of metal arms. Mason smiled like a man who had finally won. Then the doors at the back of the hall swung open and a woman in a simple black dress walked in slow and steady. Her name was Hannah Cole. Her belly showed the soft, sure curve of late pregnancy. She did not flinch when every face turned. She did not blink when Sienna Brooks, the woman in the glittering gown beside Mason, squeezed his hand harder. Hannah stopped under the chandelier, lifted a small remote and pressed a button. The screens behind Mason lit up, not with the company logo, not with a slideshow of love, but with a clean white page that read, "State transfer, $100 million to Hannah Wells Cole." Effective immediately, the room gasped. Hannah pressed the button again. The next slide showed an ultrasound photo and 3 tiny heartbeats pulsing on the screen, steady and bright. Mason's smile fell off his face. Sienna's laugh died in her throat. Hannah's voice was calm, clear, and low. "You signed the papers," she said, "but you didn't read the last page." And then the power cut out with a loud pop and the ballroom fell into darkness. If you want to know what happens next, don't blink, don't breathe, just stay with me to the end. And hey, would you keep watching if the woman everyone called Barren walked in with 3 heartbeats and $100 million? Tap like if your answer is yes and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Some months before that night, the Cole house was quiet in a tired, heavy way, like a house that had run out of words. Morning light pushed through the blinds and drew pale lines across the floor. Hannah stood in the kitchen with her hands wrapped around a mug, even though the tea had gone cold. She wore a soft gray sweater with sleeves that covered her wrists and a long skirt with tiny flowers. Her hair was pulled back in a low bun because she did not have the strength to style it. On the counter there was a box of test strips, turned around so the label would not remind her of every time it had said no. Mason came in with his phone pressed to his ear, tie already straight, cologne strong, shoes loud on the tile. He did not look at her when he said, "I can't be late today, big meeting," and he did not hear her whisper, "I know." He took a bite of toast, scrolled through his messages and laughed at something, a laugh that felt like a door closing. "We cannot keep doing this," he said, eyes on the phone. "Your doctor said it's not happening. We have to face facts. We need a life that moves forward." The words were clean and sharp, like they had been practiced. Hannah watched him tuck his phone into his pocket and kiss the air near her cheek. "Be well," he said, which was what he said to his staff when he left the office. She watched the door close and stood very still, like a person trying not to break a glass by breathing near it. That afternoon, Hannah went to see her father's old lawyer because she had been putting it off for weeks. Her father, Daniel Wells, had been the kind of man people called solid. He built a company called Briarwood Holdings by fixing small things for small people and never cheating them. He taught Hannah how to balance a book and how to look someone in the eye and tell the truth. He died with his work boots cleaned and lined by the back door. In the firm's waiting room, Hannah sat on a chair that felt too hard and watched the light move across the carpet. The lawyer, an older man with kind eyes named Mr. Lawson, came out to greet her with a careful smile, the kind people wear when they know they will talk about money and grief at the same time. "Thank you for coming, Miss Cole," he said. "I know it's been a hard season." She nodded. He took her into a quiet office with one green plant that looked like it had been alive for many years. He opened a folder and spoke gently. "Your father kept things simple. He wanted everything in your name. The sale of the last division closed last week. After taxes and final settlements, the assets transferred today." He turned the paper so she could see it. She tried not to blink. She tried to keep her breath slow and even. The number sat on the page like a mountain that had always been there and yet somehow had arrived all at once. $100 million. "This isn't real," she said. "It is," he answered. "Your father saved. He grew money the slow way. He did not waste. He trusted you." She pressed her hands flat on the desk to feel something solid. She thought of Mason's house dreams and car dreams and travel dreams and of all the ways she had said, "Let's wait, let's be wise." Mr. Lawson kept speaking. "There are letters," he said, sliding a small stack toward her. "He wrote them over the years. He asked that you open the top one first today." She took the first letter in careful fingers. The paper trembled because her hands did. She did not open it yet. She tucked it into her bag like a heartbeat and told herself she would open it when she was alone. On the drive home, the sky was a soft blue and the air smelled like baked bread from the small shop on the corner. At a red light, a nurse from the clinic called. "We got your blood panel," the nurse said. "We need you to come in." Hannah's stomach sank. "Is something wrong? Come in," the nurse repeated. "Today if you can." The nurse's voice was not harsh, it was careful. Careful was scarier than harsh. Hannah turned the wheel and headed right toward the little medical building with the faded sign. She sat in a chair in a room that smelled like cotton and alcohol swabs. The doctor was a woman with soft eyes named Dr. Perry. She had watched Hannah cry on 2 different Decembers and 1 long July. She had said keep living when Hannah had no strength to do it. Today Dr. Perry walked in holding a tablet and said nothing for a long breath. Then she smiled, small at first, then wide. "Hannah," she said, voice bright, "you're pregnant." Hannah stared at the wall with the poster of a tree and the words "Stay Rooted." She did not cry, she did not move. It felt like hearing good news from a far place, a place where you could not trust the echo. "We need an ultrasound," Dr. Perry said. The machine hummed. The gel was cold, the room was very still, and Hannah listened to a sound like a bird wing flapping very fast and thought she might faint. Dr. Perry tilted her head. "Okay," she said, calm and focused. "Stay with me, We have more than one heartbeat." Hannah's hand grabbed the edge of the table. "Twins." Dr. Perry moved the wand again, slower. The screen showed a picture Hannah did not know how to read, but the doctor could read it. "3, she said, soft but clear. 3 heartbeats, Hannah, you're carrying triplets." The room did not spin. It turned into a field of light. Hannah covered her mouth. A sound came out that was not a sob and not a laugh. It was a sound people make when a storm lifts that you thought would never end. Dr. Perry handed her tissues and spoke in short, kind sentences. "We'll take this step by step. You'll need rest, you'll need support, you'll need someone who can drive you sometimes." Hannah nodded because nodding was the only thing she could do without breaking. On her way out, she sat in the parking lot and opened her father's letter. The paper smelled like the wooden desk in his study, like cedar and old books. "Pumpkin," it began in his neat block print. "If you're reading this, you've carried more pain than most. I can't carry it for you, but I can remind you who you are. You are not a problem to fix. You are a promise I've seen with my own eyes. Use what I left you to do good. Never trade your soul to keep a man. A right man will guard your soul with you." She read that line again, and the words landed in a quiet place where truth sits and waits until you're ready. She closed her eyes and let a few tears fall. Then she tucked the letter back and turned the car on and drove home slow, hand flat on her stomach like a vow. When she told Mason that night, it did not go like the movies. He came home late, jacket over his shoulder, tie in his pocket, a smile that did not reach his eyes. "There you are," he said, like he had been the one waiting. She told him to sit. He did not. He stood by the counter and scrolled without looking, the light from his phone making his face glow pale. "I went to the clinic," she said. He said, "We talked about this, like you would talk about canceling a gym membership." "The tests came back," she said, trying to keep her voice from flying away. "I'm pregnant." He stopped scrolling. He looked up, but not long. Be careful," he said. "We've had false hope before." She nodded and slid the ultrasound photo across the counter. He picked it up the way people pick up something they don't want to own. He stared. His mouth moved like he wanted to say a joke but could not find one good enough. "There are 3, she said, 3 heartbeats." His hand dropped. The photo fluttered to the floor. He laughed once, short and hard. "Why now?" he asked the ceiling. Then he asked the floor, then he asked nobody. "Why now, when I have finally decided to be free?" She felt the words like a door hitting her in the chest. "Free from what?" she asked, but quietly because her heart already knew the answer. He put both hands on the counter and stared at the black stone like it could solve this for him. "From this waiting," he said. "From this life that never starts. From feeling stuck, I met someone." Han. He had not called her that in months. "This was the kind of hand that made you weaker, not stronger. Her name is," he stopped. "It doesn't matter," but it did. He kept talking. "She understands my goals. She makes me feel like I can run." He pulled a folded paper from his jacket and placed it on the counter next to the ultrasound photo, still face down on the floor. "I filed," he said. "I was going to tell you tonight." The room tilted. The edges went soft. She put a hand on the back of a chair to stay standing. "You filed," she repeated. "Today," he nodded. "We can do this clean," he said. "We can stay kind." The word kind landed like a stone. The weeks after that moved like a slow train through fog. There were forms, there were calls. There was his mother bringing over boxes and saying things like, "You'll see, dear, you're both still young," while not looking at Hannah's belly at all. There was a neighbor who knocked on the door with a casserole and then said, "Who's it for?" when she saw the pregnancy. There were nights when Hannah slept sitting up because lying down made the bobbies kick in a way that felt like they were trying to climb out. There were mornings when Mason's shirts were missing because someone else now ironed them in another house. There were whispers about Sienna, the new face at the charity gala, the woman in a red dress who took photos like she had been born knowing her angles. There was a day when Hannah walked past a shop window and did not recognize herself, and the not recognizing hurt worse than the divorce. And through it all, there were letters from her father that felt like warm hands. "Don't fight for what doesn't hold you," one letter said. "Build what will hold others." When they sat in the judge's room to sign the final papers, the air felt like it had been borrowed and needed to be returned soon. The room was beige and quiet. A clock ticked like a small hammer on the wall. Mason wore a blue suit and looked at his watch more than he looked at her. Hannah wore a plain black dress that did not try to pretend. The lawyer read in a voice like a machine. "Irreconcilable differences," he said. "No shared property disputes," he said, because the house was in Mason's name and the shares of Briarwood had not been claimed yet. "No children," he said, and paused half a second as if he could feel the lie in the way the words sat. Hannah signed. Mason signed. The pen felt heavy, like it had a soul. When it was done, he stood and reached for a handshake. She did not take it. She folded her hands over her belly and gave him a small nod that said, "I will not fight with you here, not in this room, not with my children listening." He left first. He always left first. The day the wire hit her account, the bank manager called her "ma'am" 4 times in one sentence. She thanked him and hung up and stood at the window, watching a bird hop along the fence like it had not one worry in the world. She did not rush out to buy a car or a coat or a necklace. She called Mr. Lawson and said, "I want to set up a trust for the Bobbies. I want to fix the roof at the old library. I want to pay off Mrs. Green's mortgage because she watched me after school when Dad worked late." Mr. Lawson said, "Your father would be proud," and Hannah said, "I want to be proud too." She walked to the pantry and looked at the plain shelves and said out loud to the air, "We will be okay." The Bobbies kicked like they agreed. But the world does not let a quiet woman be quiet for long when money and scandal touch her name. Photos started to appear online. A hand on Mason's shoulder that was not Hannah's hand. A smile at a party that was not Hannah's smile. A ring on a finger that was not Hannah's ring. Comments said things like, "He looks happy now and finally living, and sometimes you have to choose yourself, and she never gave him kids." Hannah did not read the comments after that. She turned off her phone for a day, and then for 2 days, and then for a week. She went to her first appointment with the high-risk pregnancy team who spoke in careful words and made plans with charts. She met a nurse named Joy who braided her hair in the waiting room when Hannah cried and said, "It's okay to cry." She signed papers that let the hospital call Mr. Lawson if she could not speak. She put a go bag by the door. She started to walk each evening very slowly, counting 10 mailbox posts and then turning back. One afternoon, Sienna posted a photo from the same glass ballroom where Mason's company liked to hold its big wins. The caption had a line about forever and a line about love being brave. The comments were full of little hearts and gold rings. Hannah closed her eyes, breathed in, breathed out, and then she stood up from the sofa like a person getting out of deep water. She went to her father's desk. She took out a notebook, the cheap kind with a cardboard cover, and she wrote a list. At the top, she wrote, "For the Bobbies." Under that, she wrote, "A safe house, a clean name, kind people around us, work that helps others, the truth told plain." She looked at the list and then at her hands and then at the old camera on the shelf, the one her father used to take pictures of roofs before and after he fixed them. She picked up the camera. It was heavier than she remembered. She looked through the lens at the hallway, at the light on the floor, at the door that led to the world. She clicked the shutter and heard the old, sure sound of a thing doing what it was made to do. She smiled for the first time in a long time, not a big smile, a small, honest one. The gala invitation arrived 2 days later, thick card, gold letters. It was from a charity Hannah had given to quietly before anyone cared who she was. The invitation said, "We would be honored to have you," and it meant it. She set it on the table and stared at it for one whole minute. She thought of staying home. She thought of putting the card in a drawer. But then she thought of the list. "The truth told plain," she had written. She picked up the card. "Okay," she said to the empty kitchen and to the Bobbies who were never really quiet. "Okay." The night of the gala, Hannah wore a simple black dress that fit the new shape of her body on purpose and not in shame. She kept her hair down and wore her father's old watch with the scratch on the face. She did not bring anyone to hold her elbow on the steps. She did not need that. When she arrived, people looked at her and then looked away like the sun had hit their eyes. She walked slow. She breathed slow. She found her table and she smiled at the woman next to her who said, "You look strong," and meant it. On the stage, the hosts announced donors and thanked sponsors and showed slides of kids with new books. Then the music shifted and a low voice said, "Please welcome Mason Cole and his fiancée, Sienna Brooks." The room clapped in the polite way people clap for rich news. Mason walked out in a tux that fit like it was sewn onto him. Sienna shimmered in silver. They looked like a magazine cover. Mason thanked the crowd and started a story about a new foundation and new dreams. Hannah felt the Bobbies move. She placed a hand on her belly like you would rest a hand on the back of a friend to say, "I'm here." On the side wall, Hannah noticed a small black box with a blinking light. She recognized it because she had set up the same kind of box for a photo slideshow at a school event years ago. It was the receiver for the ballroom screens. A staffer had left a small remote on the table near the exit. The universe does not always hand you tools. Tonight it had. Hannah stood. She did not shake. She walked to the back of the room, the place where people took calls and hid their tears. She picked up the small remote with fingers that had learned to hold a lot without dropping it. On the stage, Mason said, "Sometimes love needs courage," and the crowd made that soft sound people make when they agree with a sentence without thinking about it. Hannah pressed the door bar and stepped into the cool hallway and kept walking until she stood at the main entrance. She waited until the song paused and the speech paused and the world felt like an inhale. Then she pushed the doors open and walked in. She felt every eye like a weight and a wind at the same time. She walked to the place under the chandelier right where the lights made a halo on the floor. She raised the remote and clicked. The first slide appeared, her father's transfer, plain as sunrise. A few people clapped without meaning to. Someone dropped a fork. Mason turned around. He saw the number and then he saw her belly and then he saw the number again. Sienna's mouth opened and did not close. Hannah clicked again, slow, like a person turning the page of a book they know will change them. 3 tiny heartbeats blinked on the screen and a soft recorded whoosh filled the room, quick and bright. The sound hit the ceiling and came down like rain. The Bobbies kicked like they were saying hello to the world. Hannah lowered the remote and let the room be silent for one long, full second. She looked at Mason, she looked at the crowd, she spoke like a person at a kitchen table, plain and strong. I was told I was barren, she said. I was told to make peace with an empty house. I was told to move on. I will not argue with the past. I will hold the future. She put her hand on her stomach. This is the future. She lifted her chin toward the screens, and this too. The chandelier lights flickered once, twice. Then the power cut out with a hard pop that snapped through the speakers, gasps, a few screams. The room dropped into darkness so complete that Hannah could hear her own breath and the breath of the people nearest to her. The emergency lights failed to come on. A generator somewhere coughed and died. In the dark, a hand grabbed Hannah's arm, firm and urgent. A voice she didn't know whispered, "They cut it, don't be afraid, walk with me now." And as the crowd rose like a wave and the stage lights stayed dead, Hannah did the only thing she could do. She held her stomach with one hand and let the stranger guide her with the other, straight toward a side door that had just opened, spilling a thin silver line of moonlight across the floor. The ballroom was chaos in seconds. Screams sliced through the blackness like glass breaking. Shoes scuffed against marble. Someone yelled for the generator, another for security. In the confusion, Hannah felt that firm hand again, tugging her forward. "This way," the voice whispered. She couldn't see the face, only the faint reflection of moonlight glinting off what looked like a wristwatch. She stumbled, clutching her belly. The bobbies kicked wildly, reacting to her heartbeat racing too fast. "I can't run," she gasped. The man slowed, steadied her arm, and said softly, "Then walk, Mrs. Cole, just walk." They moved through the side corridor, the smell of polished wood and perfume fatting behind them. Outside, the cool night air hit her like a breath she hadn't realized she needed. The man turned her toward a waiting car parked under a tree. "Get in," he said, voice low but calm. "You're not safe here." She hesitated, backing up slightly. "Who are you?" she asked. The man opened the back door and stepped aside. "Someone who doesn't like watching a woman fight alone," he replied. The lights inside the ballroom flickered back on just as she slipped into the seat. Through the tinted window, she saw Mason standing in the middle of the crowd, shouting at the staff, his face pale and furious. Then the car pulled away and the mansion lights disappeared behind the curve of the road. The drive was silent at first. Hannah stared at her reflection in the window, her face pale, hair messy from the night, hands trembling on her lap. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly. "Somewhere you can breathe," the man said. "My name's Ryan Blake. I handle private security for corporate clients. I was assigned to your father years ago after he sold the first branch of his company. He asked me to keep an eye out for you if things ever went wrong." Hannah turned to look at him properly now, mid-30s, tall, clean-cut, wearing a dark suit without the stiffness of Mason's kind. His eyes were calm but sharp. "You work for my father?" she asked. "Yes," Ryan said, "and I know everything Mason done these past months, the offshore accounts, the merger he's hiding, and what he took from your father's company when you weren't looking." Hannah blinked hard. "What do you mean took?" He glanced at her belly before speaking again. "Briarwood Holdings wasn't just left to you for sentiment. Your father's signature was forged last year to transfer key contracts under Mason's name. He's been building his new life on what your father created." The words stung like fire. Hannah shook her head slowly, tears pooling. "My father trusted him, he helped with everything. That's how he got in," Ryan said, "but don't worry, we'll fix that. First, you need rest." They stopped at a quiet house on the edge of the city, small, warm lights glowing through curtains, surrounded by trees. Inside, it smelled of cinnamon and safety. Ryan helped her inside, his tone respectful, almost protective. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said. "No one knows this place exists, it's under a different name." Hannah sat on the couch, her whole body shaking. "I just wanted peace," she whispered. "I never wanted revenge." Ryan crouched in front of her. "Peace and revenge aren't the same thing," he said softly. "Peace is when you make sure no one hurts you again." His voice was steady enough to quiet the storm in her chest. That night, she slept deeply for the first time in months, her father's words echoing faintly in her dreams, "Don't fight for what doesn't hold you." Weeks passed quietly. Ryan stayed mostly in the background, handling her calls and arranging security. Hannah attended her prenatal appointments in secret, using her maiden name. The doctor smiled when she saw how strong the triplets had become. "They're fighters," Dr. Perry said, "just like their mother." Hannah smiled weakly, touching her round belly. "They don't know any other way." Ryan drove her home afterward and she noticed the way he kept checking the mirrors. "You're looking for him, aren't you?" She asked one afternoon. He didn't answer at first. "Mason's team tried to track your medical file last week," he finally said, "but it's been sealed. He knows you're alive, but not where." Hannah's fingers tightened around the seatbelt. "He thinks I'm hiding because of shame," she said quietly. "Let him think that." When the contractions started 2 months later, it was early morning. Rain beat against the window like a warning. Ryan drove her to a private maternity center outside the city. The delivery was long, painful, and fierce, 3 cries at once, each one fragile and beautiful, 2 girls and 1 boy. Hannah held them all close, tears rolling silently down her face. The nurse asked names. Hannah smiled weakly. "Leela, Noah, and Ivy," she whispered. Ryan stood by the door, watching quietly, and for a moment, his eyes softened in a way that said he had not expected to care this much. When the Bobbies were 2 months old, Hannah sat at the same table where she'd once signed her divorce papers, only this time she was signing ownership documents for the companies her father left behind. Mr. Lawson smiled proudly. "With this you officially control Briarwood Holdings," he said, "and the board will support any changes you propose." Hannah nodded. "Good," she said firmly. "The first change is my name." Lawson blinked. "Your name?" She smiled faintly. "Hannah Cole is gone. I'll use my mother's maiden name. From today, I'm Emily Wells." The name rolled off her tongue with quiet strength. It felt like closing one book and opening another. Over the next year, Emily transformed. She moved her children to a private estate under heavy security. She learned to read financial statements, to speak to investors, to smile at men who underestimated her and walk away with their signatures anyway. Ryan stayed close, not as a bodyguard anymore, but as something steadier, a friend, a partner in rebuilding. "You don't need to become like him to win," he told her once when she wanted to fight Mason in court. "Then I'll just become better," she said. Meanwhile, Mason's empire began to wobble. His company, Cole & Sons, relied heavily on contracts that were legally tied to Briarwood Holdings, which now belonged to Emily. When the renewal deadlines came, her lawyers quietly reclaimed every agreement Mason had used. One by one, his investors pulled out. His new wife, Sienna, began to panic. "You promised we'd double profits," she snapped at him one night in their penthouse. "You said her name wouldn't matter." Mason threw a file across the room. "It's not her name anymore, she changed it." "But it's still her," Sienna spat. "The woman you called Barren is now running everything you lost." Mason stared out the window, veins throbbing on his neck. "No," he said coldly. "She's not running it, she's hiding behind someone. No woman moves that fast." He didn't know that Hannah, now Emily, had been studying every move since the night she left the ballroom. The next big blow came 6 months later. A news headline appeared on every business site. "Wells Group acquires Coal Industries for $1, leadership shift confirmed." Mason read it 3 times, each word slicing deeper. A knock came at his office door. His secretary stepped in, holding a letter sealed in gold. "Delivered by hand," she said. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet with one sentence: "You signed the papers without reading the last page again." He crushed the letter, slamming his fist on the desk. "Hannah," he roared, "where is she?" Emily stood that same moment in her office across the city, watching the press conference on television. Her children's laughter echoed faintly from the next room. Ryan leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. "You did it," he said. Emily's eyes stayed on the screen where Mason's face looked gray and stunned. "No," she said softly, "I started it." She turned off the television and faced Ryan. "There's one thing left to do," he nodded. "The recordings." She nodded once. "Yes. My father's signature wasn't the only thing Mason forged. He used my name too, on contracts worth millions. I have the proof now." Ryan looked at her carefully. "You could destroy him completely." She met his gaze, voice steady. "He already destroyed himself. I'm just turning on the lights." At night, Emily couldn't sleep. She walked out to the balcony, wrapping her robe around her shoulders. The city lights stretched below, a sea of gold and silver. She thought of the woman she used to be, quiet, hopeful, always waiting for someone to love her enough to stay. She whispered to the night, "I stayed long enough to learn." A baby's cry drifted from the nursery. She went in, lifted Noah gently, and held him against her chest. "We'll never live in anyone's shadow," she murmured. "Not ever again." Following week, Mason received an anonymous invitation to a charity gala. The same ballroom, the same lights. The card simply said, "Come see what truth looks like." Against his better judgment, he went, pride and curiosity leading him like a leash. The event hall looked almost identical to that night a year ago, except this time the air carried something colder. When the announcer took the stage, Mason froze. "Please welcome our keynote speaker, Mrs. Emily Wells," the man said. Applause filled the room. And then she walked out, poised, graceful, every inch a woman reborn. Mason's jaw tightened. Sienna squeezed his hand, whispering, that's her," he muttered. Emily stood at the podium, her dress black again, deliberate, powerful. She began softly. "Last year I was called barren, broken, a burden to be replaced. Tonight I'm here not for revenge, but to thank those words for teaching me who I am." The crowd listened, silent. Mason's breathing grew shallow. Emily continued. "Sometimes what people leave behind is exactly what you needed to find yourself." She paused, then looked straight at Mason. "And sometimes the person who abandoned you is the reason you learned to stand." She stepped aside and a large screen lit up behind her. Documents scrolled, signatures, emails, transfers, all proving Mason's fraud. Gasps rippled through the room. Reporters began snapping photos. Mason shot to his feet, shouting, "You can't prove," but security stepped forward before he finished. Emily's voice stayed calm. "You did that yourself when you signed my name on what wasn't yours." As Mason was let out, the lights dimmed again, but this time it wasn't chaos, it was closure. Emily exhaled slowly, eyes glistening. Ryan appeared beside the stage, silent but proud. When she stepped down, he took her hand lightly, just enough to steady her. "Are you ready for what comes next?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "I've been ready since the day he called me barren." Outside, cameras flashed, reporters shouted her name, and for the first time she didn't hide. She lifted her chin, smiled for the cameras, and whispered under her breath, "For you, Dad, for us." As the car pulled away, she looked out the window, watching the city blur past. The reflection of her children's photo on the glass seemed to glow. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this was not the end because forgiveness would come last and it would be the hardest part. But that night, for the first time, she slept without nightmares. The woman who had once been broken by loss was now the architect of her own empire. And somewhere across town, Mason Cole sat in a dark room, staring at the news headlines, realizing the empire he built on lies had been taken apart by the very woman he'd once sworn was worthless. He didn't know it yet, but his story wasn't finished either, because Emily Wells had one last truth to deliver, one that would shake him more than money or power ever could. The morning after the gala, the city woke up to headlines that screamed Mason Cole's name in bold letters. CEO exposed by ex-wife at charity event. Billionaire LOSES company to former spouse. Truth revealed in shocking video leak. Everywhere he turned, Mason saw her face, Hannah's face, now known to the world as Emily Wells. It was on billboards, television interviews, magazine covers, and financial reports. Every headline reminded him of the same thing he had once said without thinking. We can do this clean, we can stay kind. But nothing about what he felt now was clean, and there was no kindness left in his world. He sat in the corner of his penthouse, hair unkempt, still wearing yesterday's suit. Sienna had left hours ago after throwing her wedding ring across the marble floor. You ruined me, she had shouted, mascara running down her cheeks. You ruined both of us. The door had slammed and silence had filled the air like smoke. Mason leaned forward, his head in his hands. He had lost everything, his company, his fortune, his reputation, and yet the thing that hurt most wasn't any of that. It was the image of her standing on that stage, unshaken, holding herself with a grace he couldn't buy, a peace he had never given her. Across the city, Emily sat in her office with Ryan and Mr. Lawson, finalizing the transfer documents for Mason's remaining shares. Once this is signed, his accounts will be frozen, Lawson said quietly. Emily nodded, her gaze steady. And the funds will go into the Wells Foundation for children without access to care, she said. That's where the story ends. Ryan looked at her, brow slightly raised. Are you sure you don't want to keep any of it? He owes you more than this. Emily shook her head slowly. I don't need revenge to feel rich, I just need peace. For a moment the room was silent, filled with the soft rustle of papers and the hum of the city outside. Ryan smiled faintly. You've changed everything, he said, not just for yourself. Emily exhaled. I didn't do it alone, she said softly, her eyes meeting his. There was something in that look, a quiet recognition that they had carried each other through storms neither could have survived alone. That evening, Emily visited her father's old house for the first time in years. The light still worked. The porch still creaked the same way it did when she was a child. She walked through the small living room, touching the back of the old sofa where her father used to fall asleep watching baseball. She stood by the mantel where his photo hung smiling in his work shirt, holding a coffee mug that said best dad ever. For a long time, she just looked at it, the quiet wrapping around her like a blanket. I did it, Dad, she whispered. I finally stopped crying. She took out the last sealed letter Mr. Lawson had given her months ago, the one she hadn't opened yet. The envelope was old and slightly yellowed. Her father's handwriting was still strong. She unfolded the paper and began to read. Pumpkin, if you're reading this, you've reached the part of your story where pain turns into power. Don't waste time proving anyone wrong, spend your life proving yourself right. Money can build walls or bridges. Choose the bridge, and if a man ever walks out on you, don't chase him. Let him hear your name on the wind and wish he had stayed. Emily smiled through her tears, folded the letter carefully and placed it back on the mantel. Just then her phone buzzed. It was Ryan. You might want to see this, he said. Mason's made a move. She frowned. What kind of move? He just sold his house, Ryan said, and he booked a one-way flight out of the country. Emily paused. He's running. Looks like it, but there's something else. He sent an email addressed to you. No return address, but it's him. I traced it. Emily's heart skipped. Send it to me? Seconds later, the email appeared in her inbox. The subject line read, "The page I never read." Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The message was long, written like a confession. Emily, it began, I won't waste your time asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I watched your speech 10 times last night. I kept wondering when you learned to stand so tall, and then I realized you always could. I just never looked up long enough to see it. You were never barren. I was, not in body, but in spirit. I was too empty to see the gold in front of me. Everything I thought I built was borrowed from you, your patience, your loyalty, your quiet strength. I thought power came from control. You showed me it comes from peace. I don't know where I'm going, but I hope someday my children will know who I was before I became what I am now. I won't ask to see them. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for the lies, for the names I called you, for walking away before the miracle came. Mason. Emily stared at the screen for a long time, the words blurring behind her tears. There was no anger left, just a deep, tired understanding. She closed her eyes and whispered, goodbye. Then she hit delete. The message vanished, but its echo stayed in her heart, a strange mix of closure and sadness. She stood, walked to the nursery, and looked at her sleeping triplets. Leela's tiny hand rested on Ivy's arm, and Noah's chest rose and fell softly. She brushed their hair back, her voice barely above a whisper. You'll never grow up thinking love means begging to be seen. She kissed their foreheads one by one, whispering a silent prayer over each. The following months unfolded quietly. The Wells Foundation expanded, building hospitals in small towns, sponsoring schools, and giving mothers work opportunities. Emily's face became the symbol of resilience, not because she was rich, but because she had risen without cruelty. One afternoon, she stood backstage at a global women's conference, holding her note cards. Ryan walked up beside her, holding a cup of tea. "You ready?" he asked. "Ready as I'll ever be," she smiled. "You sure you don't want to add your name to the board?" he teased. She chuckled softly. "No, I like seeing it this way, built from something honest." He nodded and looked at her with quiet admiration. "Your father would be proud." "I hope so," she said, "because I finally am." On stage, Emily spoke to thousands. "We are taught that broken things have no value," she said, "but sometimes breaking is how light gets in. Sometimes losing everything is how you learn to hold what matters. I lost my marriage, my peace, and almost my faith, but I gained the truth, and truth once found can never be taken again." The audience rose to their feet in applause, some in tears, some smiling with admiration. The world had seen her fall, now it watched her rise. Meanwhile, somewhere far away, Mason sat on a beach in Lisbon, his hair longer, his face unshaven, staring at the horizon. He lived in a small rented apartment overlooking the water. He worked quietly, managing local repairs, nobody knowing who he once was. Every evening he watched families walk by, fathers carrying daughters on their shoulders, mothers laughing freely, and sometimes he smiled. He didn't have wealth anymore, but for the first time he was learning the worth of peace. He carried a single photo in his wallet, one he had printed from a magazine, Emily and her 3 children at a charity event, smiling in front of a new hospital wing. He looked at it every night and whispered, "You did it, Han." Back home, Emily continued her quiet empire, never mentioning Mason again. One day she received a brown envelope with no sender's name. Inside was a folded newspaper clipping, an article about a local man who had saved 2 children from drowning. The small black and white photo showed Mason standing by the water, smiling faintly. Below the picture was a handwritten note. "Found something worth saving." She didn't cry this time. She just placed the note inside her father's old book and closed it. "Then maybe we both did," she whispered. Years later, on a warm Saturday morning, Emily took her children to the park. Leela was chasing bubbles, Ivy was laughing with her brother, and Noah was building a sandcastle. Ryan joined them, carrying ice cream for everyone. "So," he said, sitting beside her on the bench, "are you ever going to take a day off?" She laughed softly. "Maybe today." "Good," he smiled, "because you deserve to live now, not just survive." She looked at him, eyes gentle. "You know, I used to think happy endings were for other people," she said. "But maybe they're not endings at all, maybe they're just moments like this." As the sun dipped low and the children's laughter echoed around them, Emily leaned back on the bench, watching clouds drift slowly across the sky. Life had taken everything once, her love, her pride, her peace, only to give it all back in a better form. The woman who was once broken had built something unshakable. Not revenge, not riches, legacy. And as the wind carried the sound of her children's laughter, she realized her father had been right all along. She had become the bridge, not the wall. That night, after putting the kids to bed, she sat by the window with a cup of tea. The city lights shimmered outside and she smiled faintly. She thought of Mason not with anger but with gratitude. He had been her storm, but the rain had taught her how to grow. She opened her laptop, typed a short message for her foundation's social page, and hit post. "Don't let pain make you bitter, let it make you brighter." Within hours, thousands shared it. Outside, a soft breeze moved through the trees. Somewhere across the ocean, Mason sat on a balcony, scrolling through the same post, realizing who had written it. He smiled faintly and whispered, "She's still teaching me." Then he closed his phone, leaned back, and watched the stars. Back in her home, Emily closed her eyes, whispering a quiet thank you to the world, to her father, and to the life that had broken and rebuilt her. The triplets slept peacefully in their room, the soft hum of lullabies filling the air. Ryan walked by her door, paused, and smiled before turning off the hall light. The house settled into silence, a peaceful, earned silence. Sometimes, strength doesn't roar. Sometimes, it's just a woman standing at her window, knowing she made it through everything meant to destroy her and still learned how to love again. And maybe that's the real victory, not the money, not the revenge, but the peace that comes when you finally forgive yourself for staying too long and thank yourself for leaving at the right time. So tell me, if you were in Emily's shoes, would you forgive someone who broke you, or would you let success speak for you instead? Subscribe to this channel to support our growth, stay inspired by more life-changing stories like this, and comment below. Where are you watching from, and what did this story teach you today?